Welcome to Philosophy Insights. As McCarthy just got elected U.S. House Speaker, we should take a closer look at the function of the Congress. It's quite shocking how the Congress functions today compared to just 30 years ago. In the following clip, Ryan McMaken and the bishop from the Mises Institute talk about the issue.
The sorts of changes that really took place over the last 20 years are changes that have really centralized power in Congress in leadership. So I remember I was shocked when I learned a lot more about how Congress functioned, because even though I studied it in graduate school, it was all very academic. And then I went to work at a state legislature. And the Colorado legislature functions much more closely to the way a legislature is supposed to function, in that they bring legislation. You're in fact guaranteed to get a vote on every bill you bring forward, because you're limited to the number of bills you can do per session. So you can put up 5 bills per session. You're guaranteed at least a committee hearing on all those bills. Leadership can't just decide, hey, I don't like your bill. It'll never get a hearing. That's how it works in Congress. Also, it can if it makes out of committee, if they can go to the floor where anybody can offer an amendment on it. And then there's actual debate. Again, the leadership can't just say, you'll never get a vote. If I decide you can't get a vote. And so it's this much more fluid, free process where all the members actually can represent their constituents, offer amendments, oppose bills, call for floor votes, all of those, so that you're on the record as to how you voted. The way Congress functions now is that's also tightly controlled by the leadership. And so much legislation never sees the light of day, never gets a vote if leadership doesn't like it. And what they do then is cram all of the legislation that leadership likes into these huge omnibus bills that then you're not allowed to amend on the floor. And so that's just 20 years ago. That was very different. And if we look back to the 90s, like when it was the Republican Congress after 95 with Clinton, boy, by today's standards, it was like a free-for-all. And that was back in the day when Ron Paul would attempt to control a bit how the executive branch would spend money by affecting and amending where this money would go. That was through the appropriations bills. Ridiculously, the quote-unquote libertarians thought this was a reason to oppose Ron Paul, because he was trying to direct funding instead of just letting the president decide where every dime went. Absurd that Paul was criticized for that sort of thing. But that's how Congress was functioning 25 years ago, and the way it should be functioning now, in fact, much more free and easy than even in the 90s. And so they're trying to get some concessions from McCarthy to allow some actual floor amendments on these big omnibus bills, as well as making it easier to call for vacating the chair for the speaker.
One pressing concern currently is the push for digital currency. China's digital yuan has been piloted in 15 provinces and tested across multinational financial networks. Many mainstream political voices push now for a centralized U.S. digital currency.
Congress, the House, they got to stop central bank digital currencies. Now, that's going to be my number one here today, which is this is a terrible, terrible idea. And Neil Kashkari actually, I don't know, misspoke, was mistakenly honest talking about digital currencies last year when asked about it, and noted that the only advantages you really get from digital currencies is they allow the central government to monitor people, to impose negative interest rates, to really control people's spending, and to really help set up a spy state. And he was saying that people who want digital currencies, they say, oh, look, China's doing it. He said, well, I could see why China would want to do it, because China wants to monitor and control all of its people. And that's what digital currencies are good for. Very weird that Kashkari was just sounding all libertarian on this, but he's, of course, absolutely correct. And he was saying, what can you do with digital currencies that I can't do with Venmo right now, right? And with PayPal, I can send money across international lines to you without incurring huge fees or anything like that. And so how does digital currencies improve that? What you're seeing now is claims, and I've seen in the Wall Street Journal and in other mainstream stuff, that, oh, we need digital currencies or else the Chinese will be able to take over the world and prevent the dollar from continuing to be the world's reserve currency. And so this is a narrative and a line that's getting out there. And that was really pushed by a committee that Maxine Waters had, where she had a bunch of speakers from these center-left think tank type places. And they all agreed we all need digital currencies, or China's going to be able to become more powerful geopolitically. So here we are yet again with Washington people telling us that we need to adopt basically a totalitarian sort of money that can be controlled from the center, or else our international enemies win. It's the same usual Cold War garbage about how we need to put freedom on hold or else foreign enemies will conquer us. And so, boy, we need to reject that, and the House just needs to do everything it can to prevent the Fed from moving forward on any sort of digital currency.
You're right. The committee in the House that deals with this, the Financial Services Committee, it's the same committee that Ron Paul was on. I served as a staffer on there for a few years, and this is something where there's been a lot of traction in the past for various types of kind of Fed reform things on the Republican side. Audit the Fed has passed several times through the House, never has gotten through the Senate. They've tried some attempts at rules-based monetary policy, all of which is, in my opinion, a waste of time. And again, it's never gotten through the Senate because the Senate the powers that be have a lot kind of a stronger grasp on, or stronger hold on, keeping anything that infringes upon the independence, that sacred independence of the Fed. But I do think that this is something that can gain some real traction. The civil liberties aspect of it is concerning when you do have. Again, relatively, institutional powers like Neil Kashkari, warning about, what this can do. This also ties into, one of the top priorities Republicans have claimed to have going into this cycle has been trying to reverse the, tens of thousands of new IRS agents to go over the Venmo, Cash App, trying to crack down on transactions of over $600 or so. There's already sort of a running message that Republicans have had kind of touching on this issue, trying to really make this as one of the lines of the stand to attach to, next time they have to pass through some sort of bloated, absurd, insane spending bill. This is precisely one of those things that they could kind of try to get stapled into it. I'm talking to Peter St. Onge, former Mises fellow, who was doing some great work with Heritage now on this issue, because this is one of the most important. I think this is one of those the institutional changes of how the Fed could become even worse than it already is, and now I think there really is the opportunity to make some actual positive advancement on this as a political issue.
The last issue we should pay attention to is the surveillance state.
The church committee to investigate, new church committee to investigate the FBI. So for those of you who don't keep up with this sort of thing, so back in the mid-'70s, in 1975, there was a Senate committee called the Church Committee, and there was a House equivalent also, where the mid-'70s were actually a good time in that we were coming out of Watergate and the Vietnam War, and it was starting to be recognized that the CIA and the FBI, to a slightly lesser extent back then, had become very much involved in meddling in the affairs of domestic politics. And so you would hear about all this stuff that you were told were conspiracy theories 5 or 10 years earlier, such as all these CIA experiments on people like MK Ultra, and then you had the COINTELPRO program, which was all there to basically just control people, to infiltrate private organizations with federal agents in order to spy on them. This was regarded by an earlier generation of Americans as a horrible thing. Now, ever since 9/11, and Americans all thought USA Patriot Act was a great idea and domestic spying is wonderful. Back then, when you had the Church Committee going on, it exposed the fact that you had telecommunications companies conspiring with the deep state to feed information about private citizens to the executive branch, and people thought that was a bad thing back then. And I guess a lot of people still believe that stuff isn't that bad or isn't going on, or that the CIA and the FBI have only your best interests at heart. And so this country badly needs a new iteration of the Church Committee. And there have been some suggestions then that something McCarthy should be forced to do as one of his concessions is then to allow one of these committees to be formed, and that ideally even Thomas Massie be the chair of the committee, at least in the House. And so with their subpoena power, then we would get to see finally all these FBI agents placed up there, forced to take the fifth, or I guess some will lie under oath, and then just really talk about what the FBI has been doing to people and how much it's been interfering in elections, how much it's been demanding information from companies like Facebook and Twitter and intervening in those organizations, and doing all those things that you're told are conspiracy theories, but which if the usual pattern follows, everything that's a conspiracy theory today, as far as the CIA goes, 10 years from now, turns out to just be something that was happening. And that seems to be accelerating and seems to be the truth more and more. And so absolutely, it would be wonderful to have a committee like that and to further disabuse people, especially conservatives, of this idea that intelligence agencies are on the side of the American people and just trying to help you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching this video, and if you like the content, subscribe to Philosophy Insights.